In a previous lesson, you learned about the while loop. The objective of this lesson is to learn about the for loop in Python. As you know, a while loop is repeated as long as a condition is true. A for loop is used in two different situations. The first case is when you want to go over every item in a sequence. The second case is when you want to repeat some actions a given number of times. Let me go over some examples. Imagine one bookshelf and your task is to look at each book one at a time and write the title of the book in a piece of paper. This is the case where you have to go over a sequence. You can think of the bookshelf as a list which contains a sequence of books, and you have to do something with each item in that list. The other use of the for loop is when you want to repeat something n number of times. For example, if you want to print hello 10 times. Now let's talk about the format of the for loop. Of course, you have to start it with a keyword, and for is a keyword, and every for loop must start with this keyword. After the for, you put a variable. In this example, I'm using x as my variable. You can use any variable that you want. After the variable, you must use the keyword in. After the in, there should be a sequence. For example, you may put a list or any other sequence that you want. In this example, I'm using a list with 3 elements. And after the sequence, you must use a colon. Colon is always required. The next line after the colon starts the body of the for loop, which consists of one or more statements, and all these statements must be tabbed. Any statement which is not tabbed and follows the body of the for loop is not part of the for loop. As you can see, the required elements are for, in, and colon. As you may have noticed, the format of the for loop is almost the same as in an English sentence. For example, you may say to somebody, for each book in bookshelf, do something. Or, for this example, you are actually saying, for each x in the list of dog, cat, and 5, do the following 3 statements. What happens is that the for loop will be repeated 3 times, or technically 3 iterations. In the first iteration, the value of x is dog, and Python executes the 3 statements in the body of the for loop. Once the first iteration is finished, Python changes the value of x to cat and executes the 3 statements in the body of the for loop again. And in the third iteration, the value of x will be set to 5 and 3 statements will be executed again. Once all the iterations are finished, then Python jumps out of the for loop and executes the rest of the program, which in this case is the last print which is not tabbed. Let me use the Python IDLE and show you all these examples in the Python environment. I'm opening the Python IDLE, and as usual, I create a new file, and the first thing that I do, I save this file under a name and in a directory that I can remember later. So I will call this books on the shelf. Now I will start to write my program. The first thing that I would do, I will create a list with 4 elements, and I would call this list my books. The first element is Python, the next is Java, the next is C++, and the last element is Ruby. Now I write my for loop for x in my books, then print x. What this program does when I run it, it assigns x to Python first, then prints x, then sets x to Java, and then goes and prints x again, and it goes over each element in the list, and once it is done, goes to the print no more books on the shelf. Notice that the this printf statement is out of the for loop, and it is only printed when all the iterations of the for loop are finished. The next thing I do, as I recommended before, I don't like to use the names such as x and y, so I'm just changing the name of the variable x to be my current book, which is a little more descriptive, and if I run it, you see that nothing has changed. Now let's have some fun, and every time that I want to print the name of my book, I also want to say which book number it is. So to be able to do this, I will initialize a variable called number of books, and I initialize it to 0 before I start the for loop. And in each iteration of the for loop, I'm adding 1 to this variable. Now you can see that if I run my program, it also tells me the book number as well as the name of the book. And once all the iterations are done, Python goes out of the for loop and prints no more books on the shelf. The next example is where you want to repeat something n times. Let's consider the example that I want to print hello 10 times. Here I open the Python IDLE and create a new file and call it print hello and save it. What I can do if I want to print hello 10 times is to create a list of numbers with the elements 1 to 10, then write a for loop going over each number of the list, and in the body of the for loop, print hello. As you can see, my program prints hello 10 times. But this approach is very inefficient. What if I want to repeat something 1,000 times? Do I have to type all the elements of a list with 1,000 elements? Of course not. There is another way, and it is to use a function called range. This function can create a list of numbers automatically. All you have to do is to specify the starting number and the end number. For example, if I want to create a list of numbers from 1 to 10, then I will say range, open parentheses, 1, comma, 11. 11 is not a mistake. The range function starts with the start number, but it always goes to the last number minus 1. So if you want to create all the numbers from 1 to 10, you have to say range, open parentheses, 1, comma, 11, and close parentheses. Now if I run my program, you see that it prints hello 10 times again. To make sure that I'm counting correctly, let me print the iteration number on the side of the hello. All I have to do is change the printf statement to print the current number. And here is the result, which of course is going through 10 iterations. Now if I want to repeat the process 100 times, all I have to do is to change 11 in the range function to 101. Remember again, if you want to go to 100, then you have to specify the end one more than what you want, which in this case is 101. Also remember that the start value of the range function does not have to be 1. You can start from anything that you want. For example, I can start from 90 and go to 100 by changing the start value to 90, and of course the end value has to be 101, so it can go from 90 to 100. There are more options that you can use in the range function, but I'm just presenting the simplest form of this function in this lesson. So, what did you learn in this lesson? You learned how to write a for loop in Python. You also learned that for loops are used in two different situations. In the first case, if you want to go over a sequence of objects such as elements of a list, and in the second case, if you want to repeat some piece of code n times.